great. Well, thank you so much for coming and for having me here. Wow, there are a lot of people in this room. That's great. So this is my first Big Data Day. I'm really excited to talk to all of you. And I guess today, maybe not so cheery on a Saturday morning, but I wanted to talk about problems. So how many of you here would say that you have problems? Okay, well, I'm really curious about the roughly more than half of you who did not raise your hands. Um, Denial is also a problem, just so you know. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's safe to say that we all have problems. And, our Buckminster Fuller, really famous 20th century architect, if you guys know the geodome design, he was the one who popularized it. He said that the one common experience of all humanity is the challenge of problems. And he and many other philosophers of that time really started thinking about what is a good way to systematize the collection of problems. Like people like Fuller believed in the power of collective thinking to solve collective problems. But in order to apply problem solving collectively, one needs to begin by making a collection of problems. How else can you solve and understand global problems without a database on what those issues are? That's why I mentioned before that this might be the largest database ever, because theoretically it is ever going and it never ends. So thus was born the idea called the Encyclopedia of World Problems. So in 1972, two international organizations, the Union of International Associations and Mankind 2000, started an ambitious project to document the problems of the world and to match them with suitable strategies. At the time, it was judged to be an impossible project, and people called it sheer madness, and the people who were involved in it were very much ridiculed. So how did they do it? How did they even begin thinking about creating this big database? We talk about big data today. I've seen so many and met so many interesting people who work across a lot of industries and technologies and use things that I've never even heard of. But remember that in their time, this was before really the internet, before many computers. So really, in order to do it, they had to look through a lot of paperwork. So one of the organizations I mentioned, the Union of International Associations, maintains files. It still does this, actually. Files on transnational and governmental and non-governmental entities. To this day, it still publishes something called the Yearbook of International Organizations. So it had this information on like all the transnational organizations known to it at the time. The original intention for this Encyclopedia of World Problems was to collect information on problems as perceived by these organizations. So the UIA sorted through a bunch of files, and in fact, over the course of doing this, it became one of the early organizations to use computers and to compile the data to track trends and associations among problems. So it went from an early research effort to this. So everyone called it sheer madness, but actually in 1976, they published a Yearbook of World Problems and Human Potential. And then they had 3 more print editions. They changed the yearbook to encyclopedia. They had their first digital product, a CD-ROM, in 1996. And in 1999, they created an online version. And despite the ridicule they received in the beginning for undertaking such an ambitious project, people actually began to take them seriously. So they worked very closely with the UN. The Union of International Organizations still holds a consultatory status. with the UN, and the European Union actually helped to fund the initial drive to put the encyclopedia from 3,000, 6,000, whatever pages it was. Actually, I think I have it here. It was over 3,000 pages long, and the first edition identified about 8,000 problems. As we know, there's probably more problems than that in the world. But yeah, so then they put it online, which was great. And here is what the first online version looked like. This is the Union of International Associations website. There's the world problems. As you can see, it's expanded from about 8,000 to 56,000 in the first online version. Yeah, and so the beauty of the encyclopedia being online isn't just that it saves paper and we don't have to lug around paper encyclopedias anymore. Actually, it's that you could make continual updates to the database along with searchability and more sophisticated cross-referencing. But financial troubles in the 2000s made it difficult for the UIA to continue, and this encyclopedia was rarely updated. In fact, if you go to the website right now, I did this yesterday, this is exactly what the online version, the public-facing online version looks like today, which I think is a shame. You know, we live in this world where we have Wikipedia, we have all the encyclopedias online where people can not only use it to access information, but they can use it to enter information, and they can collectively work on making a better product. And the fact that this looks like this, I think is kind of sad. But thankfully, you know, so did many people at the UIA. So its current Secretary General and some of the more passionate people who are involved in this have decided to start it over again and to make it not not look like this anymore and bring it to the next level, to revamp it. So the project is in its early stages, but I wanted to talk to you guys today because I wanted to present to you some of the major changes that the encyclopedia is thinking about, and to hear your thoughts and see how the broader data community could get involved in the redevelopment of such an exciting endeavor. So one major change, which may sound trivial, but I think it's not, the copyright was actually held by those two international organizations I mentioned for this encyclopedia. So theoretically, everyone who used information from it had to ask for permission. But now we've changed it to a Creative Commons license, which means that the data is freely available and republishable as long as the original source is credited. And then also, as I mentioned before, the way that problems were entered in this database they were problems as perceived by international organizations. Now, we would like to make it a broader variety of sources. The vision is for the encyclopedia to be a resource representing world problems as perceived by humans, not just by international groups. I've put up a Prezi link if there's a lot more information on like the more technical side of the redevelopment. And I think like one next step, as I also mentioned, is to Wikify it and more, to make it a collective problem solving as a collaborative crowdsourced project. I don't think it should just be some people in Brussels, nice as they are, updating this database. I think that it should be like, I don't know, I guess I think of it as a more targeted version of Wikipedia, where people can update and create entries about problems as they perceive them, and add to the body of knowledge that's there. Like there's about 80,000 problems in the database. It would be really interesting if there were more, and it would be great if there was more information on the problems being presented. And then as the ultimate goal, apart from just identifying world problems, the encyclopedia could map the complexity of their interrelationships. And I think this is where the power really comes in. It's not just about creating a big database. I don't think data is useful unless it's applied towards something. I think that actually if we can come together and create a big database and then also use it not just to identify problems but to begin solving them, that's where the power really comes in. That's why I've called this the Encyclopedia of World Problems and Human Potential, not just world problems. It also makes for a less depressing title. So I'll just show you briefly, like this is what the editing platform looks like. It's not public yet. You can get a login to it if you request, and if anybody here wants one, I'm happy to put you in touch with the right people. But this is just an example of what an entry looks like in the encyclopedia. So poverty is a very general problem. This is the page for poverty. You can see where there have been revisions of the page. We have the version history. We have some visualizations on hierarchical relations and causal relations. The related tab hasn't really been filled out yet. So here we have the definition. And I think that since there's so much information in the world, it's not necessarily useful to argue over what the correct definition should be in the definition field, but rather it would be interesting to look more at the other aspects of the problem itself. So as I mentioned, I think the power in the encyclopedia lies in its potential to identify trends among different problems. And so here there are narrower entries under poverty, like different types of poverty, deprivation, socioeconomic poverty, which are entries itself in the encyclopedia. There are aggravates and aggravated by, which can be used to identify cycles or loops among and between different problems. So it would be very interesting to follow the chains of aggravation from one problem to another, and so forth. So here's like a visualization that's also on the page about the different aggravates and aggravating loops to the problems themselves. Poverty is kind of hard to see, so I'm going to turn to another one that here we can see an example of where aggravating loops chains will loop back to their own beginnings or to intermediate loops. So in such problems, there are issues that aggravate each other and they kind of form this closed circuit which reinforce each other. I guess this is what we know as a vicious cycle problem. So statelessness aggravates migrant labor, aggravates discrimination, aggravates refugees, aggravates back to statelessness. So let's go back to the poverty page. You'll notice there's some other fields in there, like related web pages, which could be updated. Obviously, it's not just the UNDP, which has the monopoly on poverty information. There's a Wikipedia link. There's strategies for tackling it, and different types and subjects, much like an encyclopedia, the paper version would index. So here are some other types of relationships among problems that I think would be interesting to look at. Reduction, one problem reducing another. Hierarchy, like what's the ranking between problems? Are some broader than others? And other elements of relatedness. So I guess I'll close with what the encyclopedia would be looking for from people like you. definitely always looking for project partners, or if people want to get started in the login platform that I just showed. Funding or in-kind support, always welcome. Suggestions or direct editing related to things like new entries and new categories, and just ideas on how this project can be better communicated. And finally, as the database grows, more research into the problems themselves, into what problems would be the most interesting to look at, which ones are in the aggregating loops, what are the trends and patterns. So I'll leave you with some links to additional information about the encyclopedia if you're interested, as well as my Twitter handle, because I love Twitter. So feel free to contact me or anyone at the encyclopedia. And I have some time for questions. That's it. Yes. Yeah, so the Los Angeles Times is not affiliated with this system. That just happens to be where I'm working now as a data research analyst. But to your question, right now, the UIA still uses this encyclopedia to inform their understanding, and they still interact with the transnational organizations involved in creating the problems database. I'm not sure if there are any corporate active users of the encyclopedia. I think one issue is that the web page hasn't been updated, so like the web page that you see it now is the public-facing version, and so the redevelopment is also about thinking about potential users. Yes. Well, I think that's like a good question, and that's one I've thought about for a long time. Google is helpful to look up poverty, which is a specific problem, and as is Wikipedia. But how would you use Google to get a list of all problems as perceived by mankind? Or how would you subset Wikipedia in a systematic way? I'm not sure that that's very clear to me. So like Google can help you find very detailed information, but it can't necessarily help you segment that information. Yes. Wiser Earth Directory? Okay. Yeah, I think that the encyclopedia is really working on getting new partnerships with people, not just the two organizations that founded it. But yeah, I will look that up. What other organizations did he work with? Do you know? Uh-huh. Cool. Yeah, I know when the EU was involved with the encyclopedia, they worked on an ecology project together with it. So, yes. the funding is coming from the Secretary General of the UIA. One person, or one entity, I should say. But personally, since I'm not even really involved with them aside from my personal relationships, I would say that's not a good thing. I think it's probably wise to diversify funding. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Well, I think that many of the problems that are in here are the ones that are created by humans themselves. Um, so that I think that humans definitely have the potential to create problems, um, but they have more potential to create data entries of problems that they've created. So that's my answer to that. Yes. Yeah. So one of the lead developers on this project recently wrote a paper called "Loop Mining" in the Encyclopedia of World Problems. That paper was presented at the Futures Conference, I think sometime last year. And so that spoke to kind of what I was talking about here, where there are certain problems as identified in the database as having this circular relationship. And so using the data behind the encyclopedia, he tried to find certain problems that seem to be in these aggravating loops and cycles. I think, like, I'm kind of torn personally. I think as a data person, I would like data sets to be as complete and, comprehensive as possible before analyzing them. But in a project such as this, it's impossible to get to that complete listing. But I would say that right now the focus is on making the editable platform optimal for a public-facing website and making the information available to the public. So then, not only can the database become more comprehensive, as I would like it to be, but people can also start doing research on it. Yes. Yeah. Um, well, I guess I would say that one of the ways the encyclopedia was used in the early days was to identify particular strategies to solve different problems. I think as early as 1995, they started focusing on solutions in addition to problems. And I know that when the international organizations came together, like the UN, to create things like the Millennium Development Goals in 2000, which were the set of goals for the world to work on, like decreasing child mortality rates or reducing extreme poverty. Those goals were informed by research like this one. I think that's a lot of the reason why the founding body still holds that consultatory status with the UN, is because when world leaders or whomever get together on a high level to discuss what problems should be tackled, even if they agree we should only, focus on 5 or 10 because it's impossible to focus on all of them, what body of research are you taking the 5 or 10 from? So I think that like in those early stages of developing the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals, the Encyclopedia of World Problems played a major part. Now, like as for more recent examples, again, because this website kind of died between 2000 and 2011 and hasn't really been revived or updated until 2013, it's I think there will be more potential when it's public. Yes. Yeah. So actually, they have a lot of different problems in here, not just like really high level ones. I think one of the fun parts about this was that, let's see if I can make this. There are problems that are very specific, like roosters fighting each other. That's a problem, or things like obesity or procrastination. Like it's not just like poverty, statelessness, refugee. It's also like the problems that you might face in your daily lives. I think that's like the problems as perceived by humans. Okay, so air pollution. Oh, look, cockfighting. So yeah, this is a problem because cockfighting apparently doesn't have much information about it, but it is a sport that people engage in where they have two roosters fighting each other. And this might be viewed as animal cruelty. But look, this entry isn't very well updated, so if you would like to add to it or think about this particular problem, then yeah, then that's a good feature. Yeah. So there are very specific problems as well. Yeah, so so when the UIA formed this project, there was this one guy, Anthony Judge, who wrote long essays about this issue. Like, what is a problem? How is it defined? Oh, okay. Do we not have? Yeah. Okay, yeah, so he thought about this a lot. I don't have a good answer for you. I think that certain problems are more subjective than others, and I think that is the problem in and of itself, creating a hierarchy of what's more important and what's not. But I do think, maybe there could be an entry that's like counter in this entry, as in like how could this problem actually be a solution, or how could it actually be not a problem at all? So I think that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. I understand. Yeah. Now, if this were like, the poverty entry, I would. Yeah. Quick questions? Yes? Yeah, so right now there are 3 developers working with the encyclopedia to view it, to revise it, and stuff. So you can see like that's the revisions tab here. Like it goes through like the version history and who has modified it and why. Um, yeah, but I'm not sure what that would look like. The moderation. I would think that one of these people